And we are very, very excited to welcome one of our favorite people. And I can say that. I'll say it. I'm not afraid to say it. Beth Mowins. You see her on ESPN. She's also on the Raiders preseason broadcast. And Beth, first off, the important stuff. How is everyone in your world doing? How is the health? How is the safety of everyone in the Beth Mowins camp doing at the moment?
So far, so good. You know, we've been social distancing. I'm really proud of the way that California has handled it. We're one of the first to kind of step back and stay by ourselves. And so we're all doing well, and just thrilled, I'm sure, with the rest of Raider Nation that we actually had the draft to watch and to sort of take part in and get a little taste of sports back.
Absolutely. And let's get into that draft right away. So night one, the Silver and Black started making some big moves. We knew going into it, I think conventional wisdom suggested that this team was going to pick up a wide receiver. They ended up having their pick of the quote-unquote big three there at number 12, and they go with Henry Ruggs III. You watch a lot of college football. You watch more college football than probably anyone in our department. But what do you like about Ruggs in his game and how he's going to fit in this Raiders offense?
Well, I think, the one thing that Mayock and that Gruden and Olsen and everybody has really talked about is getting the speed back. And Ruggs certainly does that. I know there have been all kinds of comparisons to Tyreek Hill and all the versatility that he brings. But first and foremost is the speed, Eddie. And I think a wonderful trickle down from that. When you have to worry about him taking the top off as a defense every play, then that opens up the rest of the field. That may take a safety out of the box for Josh Jacobs. That may open up things underneath for Waller and Witten and that tight end room. And then you talk about the opportunity with Ruggs, and then later on when they pick up Lynn Bowden, you're throwing in jet sweeps, you're throwing in tunnel screens and bubble screens, just finding a way to get the ball in his hands with a little space and then letting that speed take over. And that's one of the things I think that will be so critical is for him to stay healthy and for the Raiders to be able to set the tone with him, play hopefully early in the season. And that should really open up the field for everybody else in that offense.
We're going to talk about Lynn Bowden in just a second, but through all the people that we've talked to the past 36 hours, every single person to a T has brought up what Henry Ruggs is going to mean for Josh Jacobs in 2020. And let's not forget how dynamic, how explosive he was as a rookie a year ago. But just for the reasons that you said, defense are going to have to take note of him. You're got to take that man out of the box now. And can you imagine what he's going to be like, Josh, headed into year two, more comfortable in the system, and now hopefully, if all goes to plan, with a little less pressure in that box?
And I really think, Eddie, too, the workload can come down for Josh. I'm sure there will still be moments where if he's got the hot hand early, obviously you ride him and you let him do his thing. But, I was interested to see if they might pick up another running back. And even though they technically did not, certainly you can use Ruggs in the backfield. You can use Bowden in the backfield. He can even do some wildcat, obviously played some quarterback. So in essence, even though they didn't pick up a running back per se, they have guys now that can help carry a little bit of the load out of the backfield for Josh, and that only makes him better. Obviously, we saw what happened when his health was an issue later in the season. So Josh coming back healthy and with the other weapons now around him and with some more additions in the tight end room and I think some better depth up front is really going to open things up tremendously for Josh.
Yeah, I think when you're thinking about big winners from the past 2 days, Josh has to be right at the top of that list. And General Manager Mike Mayock did say last night that we are going to see some of Lynn Bowden in the backfield playing running back. And as you mentioned, an incredibly versatile guy, a guy who can really do everything. You don't see a lot of guys like him anymore, do you, though, Beth? He's kind of an anomaly in that sense where he can do so many things.
I think the terminology that the Raiders use is the Joker. That's what I've been hearing a lot in terms of what the position will be or positions that Bowden will play. But he was the Paul Hornung Award winner, which means he's the most versatile, the best all-purpose guy in all of college football. He was their leading receiver before he had to move over and play quarterback. He didn't throw it a ton, but he obviously showed us what he can do with his feet. And go back to that Belt Bowl, you kind of saw the fire and the ice that he provides. Bearing in mind it was against Virginia Tech, and Bud Foster, who is one of the most respected defensive minds in college football history. And Lynn ran for over 200 yards, scored a couple of touchdowns, and then actually beat the Hokies with his arm, the game-winning touchdown pass. That was the ice in his veins. And I think collectively, Eddie, what we see is, the last thing we saw with Oakland was the struggles in late November and through the month of December when they lost 5 of 6. They couldn't score. They couldn't hang with the opponents, didn't get over 21 points in any of those last 6 games. This should really help them change things on the offensive side with all these additions.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were joking last night, kind of after the draft was winding down, and we were kind of just talking amongst ourselves. And you're like, man, can you imagine how much fun John Gruden's going to have scheming up plays for Lynn Bowden, but then Henry Ruggs and Josh Jacobs, and don't forget about Darren Waller. And now a healthy Tyrell Williams, Hunter Renfrow in year 2. I mean, you look at this offense now with one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. And boy, John Gruden must be beside himself, already scheming plays and ready to get this thing going.
Oh, to be privy, if you could get a sneak peek or a look at the playbook in the preseason, and then to be a fly on the wall when he and Greg and the offensive staff are putting together their game plan for each week, each opponent, all the available trick plays now that they might have at their disposal. It's going to be fabulous to watch the Raiders. And I love the way, too, Eddie, that they've done it this offseason. It started free agency where they obviously address their needs on the defensive side, at linebacker and in the secondary. They add terrific leadership and experience with guys like Witten and Aguilar on the offensive side. They add a QB in the room with Mariota. And now the draft, we see all the offensive weapons coming in. And as we've talked about, sprinkled throughout is the third phase of the game and the big upgrades, I think, in special teams.
You know, I'm glad you brought up that kind of overarching plan, because that's one thing that has really stood out to us over the past several months and has really kind of come to fruition the past couple of days, is the entire attack from John Gruden and Mike Mayock. Everything seems very calculated. It seems very measured. There hasn't been a moment or 2 moments in this draft where you kind of have that head-scratching moment of, well, what are we doing here? Everything they've done, starting in free agency and really coming to a head the past couple of days, has been very measured, and it has filled needs on this roster going forward.
Yeah. I think the other big thing to watch is how do the younger guys continue to get better. I think the expectation is going to be a lot higher on Cleveland, for example. I think the expectations will still be high for Jonathan Abram coming off the injury and essentially getting a redo on his rookie season. And so when you know, a lot of folks may have scratching their heads when Damon Arnett's name got called, I'm going to give those guys the benefit of the doubt that they watch the film. They know a lot about this guy. They think that he is going to have an impact. He has to really step into the starting lineup. You got to figure when you're a first-round pick like that.
For us, taking a look at it now, almost in its totality, we still have a little time left to see how the UDFAs are going to shake out. But when you look at this past couple of days in its totality, competition has really been the one thing that has stood out to us.
Yeah.
You mentioned the depth along the offensive line, these wide receivers, adding another linebacker after this team has already done so much in free agency. Man, it is going to be cutthroat come whenever this team is allowed to get back on the
field. Yeah, and that competition can only help them get better. I think there's tremendous depth. This was a playoff contender around Thanksgiving, and then the injuries really started to take their toll, and this began. So more depth is going to be fabulous. The more competition for spots will be fabulous. And, you know, I'm staying optimistic, Eddie. I've already started putting together, I call this my springboard. And there'll be another one as we get closer to training camp. But the guys in green will be the free agents. The guys in orange are the rookies. And the guys in yellow are the returning starters. And you love to see a lot of yellow along not only the offensive line, but the defense line as well. Some familiar faces up front. You know, we haven't even gotten into Malik Collins and Carl Nassib, guys who could really help on the defensive side. And I'm very excited. I did get a chance to see Demarius Randall with the Browns last year. I think he could be a big plus. That's probably the one area for me that secondary will be a lot of guys that aren't familiar with one another that'll have to come together quickly, because as you look at it right now, you could start second-year man Mullen and Ricky Arnett at the corners, Randall, a new guy, and Abram, essentially a new guy at safeties, and then you're sprinkling in Joyner, Eric Harris. Hopefully Isaiah Johnson has taken a big step forward, and then you've got the experience of Harris and Lawson back there. So there's some depth there. Going to be tough to crack the starting lineup, but hopefully that group will be a lot better because they have to be. In the wins last year, that defense only allowed 19 points per game. In the losses, the Raider defense was giving up over 30 points per game. So we've seen through the draft, Eddie, how much the rest of the West and the Raiders are ramping up their offenses. So we'll see hopefully the Raider defense will be up to the challenge.